Let us start. I'm talking about bariatric surgery for the treatment of obesity and metabolic diseases. Why are we talking about obesity? We know that there is a rapid rise in prevalence of obesity. Now, obesity has been recognized as a disease. We have got much better options of surgery for obesity, and there's an increased focus on improving or resolution of metabolic diseases by surgery. As far as definition of obesity is concerned, earlier on we used to recognize obesity by apple shapes or pear shapes, waist hip ratios. That all has been discussed by Dr. Shafekar and Dr. Manish. But as a surgeon, we use again BMI. BMI we know is the weight in kg divided by height in meter square, and we get a value, or depending on that value, we divide obesity into different categories. Up to 25 for normalcy sake, exactly it is 24.5, 24.9, up to 25, we take it as a normal. From 25 to 30, it's overweight. From 30 to 35, it's obesity. 35 to 40 is severe obesity. And then beyond 40, it becomes morbid obesity. As name implies itself, morbid obesity means it is associated with morbidity. As far as Asian population is concerned, there is a wide prevalence of diabetes in Asian population. So that's why we are known as a place for diabesity, obesity along with diabetes. So the normal values, which are different for Western world, they have been lowered for the Asian population by 2.5. So much so that if above 40, there is a morbid obesity in Western population, we count it morbidly obese once it is 37.5. The same can be applied for other categories as well. What are the hazards of obesity? In US, it is the second only to smoking as the leading cause of preventable deaths in the United States. It accounts for nearly more than 1 lakh of death per year in US. Now you can compare it with the corona epidemic. With figure of 1 lakh touching in corona epidemic, USA has plunged into a economic financial crisis as well as loss of Trump's presidency. So this is not a small figure. So we should consider that as a big hazard of obesity. As we can see, with a BMI of around 45, there is nearly 4 times rise in mortality as compared to the normal population. There is an increasing prevalence of obesity, as we can see in the figure. Though the overweight men and women, they are nearly constant, there is a rise in obesity as well as extreme obesity in both the female as well as male groups. So much so for that Indian population, we expect that by 2030, there will be around 25 to 30% of our population will be in category of obesity. Regarding etiology, Dr. Shafekar has already talked about that. It's maybe familial, genetic, gender-related, social, psychological. It's a multifactorial. Out of that, familial, genetic, and gender are more or less constant. What has changed is the social factors. As we can see, the changing dietary patterns. Earlier on, a cup of popcorn used to give just 270 calories. Now a tumbler of same popcorn is giving 630 calories. A coffee used to give just 45 calories, and nowadays a coffee glass full of sugar, cream, milk gives around 350 calories. So that is a change which is causing wide prevalence of obesity in society. As far as pathophysiology of obesity is concerned, this is an imbalance between energy uptake and energy expenditure, as we can expect. In obese patient, there is a lack of satiety. That means they remain persistently hungry even after taking a good meal. So that may be a cause. The responsibility for that may be due to altered hormonal signals in gut and neuropeptide release by hypothalamus, resulting into altered body mechanism. The important hormones are involved are leptin, ghrelin, insulin, CCK, and as we see, there are plenty of gut hormones which will play into this phenomenon. Why we fear obesity? There are very many medical complications of obesity are there. Nearly 150 comorbidities are associated with obesity, right from strokes to cataract, coronary heart diseases, diabetes, dyslipidemia, hypertension, severe pancreatitis, cancers, osteoarthritis, multiple gynecological problems, including polycystic ovarian syndrome, gallbladder diseases, fatty liver disease, and COPD as well as orthostatic sleep apnea. So there is practically no organ is spared of hazards of obesity. Once we figure it out, we can see that in obese patient, the occurrence of diabetes may be up to 20%, hypertension and hyperlipidemia somewhere around 50 up to 50%, cardiac disease may be found to 15%, sleep apnea around 20%, depression in up to 90% of the patient. That's a very important factor that triggers the overeating as well. How can we gain advantage by weight loss? As we know, 0.5 to 9 kg weight loss may be associated with 53% reduction in cancer-related deaths in obesity, around 44% reduction in diabetes-associated mortality, and overall 20% reduction in total mortality. Survival keeps on increasing every 3 to 4 months for every kg of weight loss. There is a reduced incidence of hyperlipidemia, hypertension, and reduced insulin resistance. There is improvement in severity of diseases. Person feel fit and mentally more active. So what are our options? It has been already talked about by Dr. Shafikar and Dr. Manish. Diet, exercise, and behavioral changes, drugs, and finally the weight loss surgery. What are the benefits? Diet may result into 10% of excess body weight in most of the cases. Drugs can reduce 20% of the excess body weight. And weight loss surgery may result into 40 to 80% loss of excess body weight. Now, what is this excess body weight? If the normal person should have, say, around 50 kgs of weight, and he is having 100 kgs of weight, so a reduction of 10% means of excess body weight. That means he has got 50 kg of excess body weight. So 10% can be reduced. That means 5 kg. In surgery, this we can achieve up to 40 kgs by a variety of surgeries, up to a lower limit of around 40% for different kinds of surgeries, as we will see later on. What are the guidelines for selecting obesity treatment? For overweight patient, that means above 25, onward, all patients should go for diet, exercise, and behavioral therapy. All patients in category of severe obesity, that means more than 30 BMI, they may be treated with pharmacotherapy. Surgery is offered for patients having BMI of more than 40, that means morbid obesity. With association of comorbidity like diabetes, hypertension, and dyslipidemia, we can reduce the level of BMI to offer these kinds of therapies. They may go as together surgeries, or they may be used as a altogether in a single patient. Once we start patient on diets and exercise therapy, they initially work well. But ultimately, only 5% of the patient, they may sustain a significant weight loss. There's a lot of problem with that. It requires a lot of time and energy. There is always a feeling of deprivation. And it doesn't address the basic problem of overeating that may be related to leptin levels, because as the body mass goes down, leptin levels go down. so that there's a craving for food. So there is a resistance to lose weight. So this is not very effective unless patient is very well motivated and has got a very strong willpower for exercise as well as dietary restrictions. Exercise hurts, as we know. It is very difficult to sustain exercise for 1 hour to 1.5 hours every day, 365 days a year for lifelong. So most of the patient, they fail, and there is a phenomena called as yo-yo effect. Initially, patient starts doing all these exercise and dietary restrictions, they lose weight, they become happy, but then they become complacent. And then some phenomena occurs like stimulation is there, and then they again start overeating. So if they lose 2 kg or 3 kgs, they gain 4 kgs. Again, they have got some stimulus to lose weight, and they again lose 3 kg. But as soon as this stops, they may gain 4 to 5 kg. So this is the yo-yo phenomenon. They keep on gaining weight. Drugs have been discussed by Dr. Shafikar. Sibutramine and Orlistat are the drugs. Sibutramine has already been discussed. It's not being used now. Orlistat can be used. It can reduce up to 30% of the fat absorption by lipase inhibition, but ultimately results into multiple side effects like flatulence, crampy abdominal pain, multiple stools, foul smelling stools. So people are not very willing to continue these drugs for a long time. So what are the options left? So we come to surgery once these options are exhausted or once patient is morbidly obese to get treated. Surgery for treatment of clinically severe obesity is endorsed by multiple international as well as national societies. What is the purpose of bariatric surgery? It is not cosmetic surgery. We are not here to reduce or make a person figurine. It's basically to reduce weight, to eliminate or reduce the medical diseases by reducing weight. So one should not confuse bariatric surgery with a cosmetic surgery. What may be the results of attaining weight loss by surgery? As we can see in this figure, from 50 to 80% resolution in most of the diseases. As you can see, the depression, sleep apnea, asthma, cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, GERD, stress incontinence, joint problems, polycystic ovary syndrome, diabetes. Diabetes, you can figure it out up to 83% resolution. Metabolic syndrome up to 80% resolution. Fatty liver diseases up to 90% improvement in steatosis. Dyslipidemia around 63% resolution. So there's a wide range of diseases which can be affected by a successful bariatric surgery. There is overall 89% reduction in mortality for next 5 years. Here we can see in this graphs with successful bariatric surgery, a patient can lose weight of around 40% of total weight. This is not excess weight. Right now we are talking of the overall weight, which can be maintained up to, even after 10 years, up to 27%. Similarly, BMI can be reduced by 8 to 10 degrees by successful bariatric surgery. HbA1c levels can be reduced up to 3 to 2.5 in most of the cases by a successful bariatric surgery. And for a long term, this is a figure for 3 years, but this can be maintained. There's an overall reduction in mortality by 89% as compared to non-surgical obese group. Recommended BMI values for bariatric surgery in Asians has already been discussed is 37.5. That is a limit for morbid obesity. With comorbidity, it can be reduced by 5. With two associated to comorbidity, we can start offering bariatric surgery even for 32.5 BMI. There may be contraindications for surgery. All end-stage diseases where we don't expect a good life expectancy should not be offered bariatric surgery. It's a multidisciplinary team approach involving surgeons, physicians, anesthetists, dietitians, specialists, bariatric nurse, theatre staff, psychiatrists, and not the least, plastic surgeons afterwards. Preoperative evaluation is not different from any other major surgery with a special emphasis for cardiorespiratory functions. We may require sleep studies in orthostatic sleep apnea patient. UGI scopy and USG for gallstones may be done. Routine antibiotic prophylaxis is given. DVT prophylaxis is always given either with a low molecular weight heparin, or if BMI is more than 50, you may consider IVC filters as well. What are the risks involved in surgery? Yes, with any surgery, there are risks involved. Death up to 1% has been reported. Severe malnutrition because of altered physiology and gut alteration, resulting in anemia, protein energy malnutrition, osteomalacia. There may be surgical complications like peritonitis because of leak. There may be obstruction later in life. Minor risk may be dumping, diarrhea, lactose intolerance, hair loss because of low protein intake. They may be there. Once we compare the risk of surgery to any other common surgery, we can see that for cholecystectomy, mortality may be up to 0.8%, whereas for bariatric surgery, it is up to 2%. Early complication may be 3 times more in bariatric surgery. Late complication may be up to 10 times more in bariatric surgery. But they are all acceptable, as we know that the gains are much more higher as compared to the risk involved. Surgery for obesity is not a new discipline. Even in 1954, Ali bypass was tried at Minnesota with successful result, but with high malabsorption rate. Gastric bypass was tried in 1966 at University of Iowa. Roux-en-Y gastric bypass by Griffin was done in 1977. With advent of laparoscopic surgery, there was a exponential rise in obesity surgery. As we can see, in 1997, there were just 40,000 surgeries reported, which were around 5 lakhs by 2013 per year. What are the types of surgery involved? Basically, it is the restriction of capacity to eat. There may be malabsorptive procedures, and there may be mixed surgery. And there are a few newer options. What are the restrictive procedures? In this procedure, we create a pouch of approximately 30 to 40 cc, so you cannot eat more. And we create a obstruction for the outlet as well, so there is no rapid emptying. The various kind of restrictive procedures are BBG, adjustable gastric band, sleeve gastrectomy, gastric plication, intragastric valve. Out of this, right now, sleeve gastrectomy is in vogue. AGB was very popular earlier on, but nowadays it is not that popular as compared to sleeve gastrectomy. The malabsorptive procedures, they try to alter the anatomy of gut so that mixing of bile and pancreatic juice with ingested nutrients comes quite late, and a very small bowel is available for absorption, resulting into malabsorption. So the procedure classical is jejunal ileal bypass, biliopancreatic diversion, and endoluminal sleeve are mostly malabsorptive but partially restrictive as well. Then there are mixed procedure which use both the things, restriction of diet as well as malabsorption. Among that, Roux-en-Y gastric bypass is the foremost surgery right now. Other difficult surgeries, advanced surgeries are sleeve gastrectomy with duodenal switch. A newer surgery is mini gastric bypass. Before venturing for these surgeries, we should delve into some gut hormones. Gut is one of the biggest source of hormones. Important among them is ghrelin, which is being produced by fundus of the stomach, GLP, which is the incretin produced by distal bowel, GIP, which is produced by duodenum. These will play into the hormonal and neuro regulation of absorption, as we will see. The incretins are the one which stimulate glucose-dependent insulin release. Mostly they are important ones are two, GLP-1, that is glucagon-like peptide, which is produced by ileum and colon, which inhibits glucagon secretion resulting into decreased hepatic glucose release, inhibits gastric emptying resulting into anorexia, enhances beta cell proliferation. GIP is produced by duodenum. It primarily enhances beta cell proliferation. Non-incretins which are involved are peptide YY, which is led by again distal gut. It increases satiety and decreases gastric emptying. Ghrelin is released by gastric fundus and proximal gut. It acts on hypothalamus to regulate appetite, inhibits insulin release and promotes growth hormone, stimulates appetite and food intake, suppresses energy expenditure and fat catabolism. Then third category was introduced by Rubino. He hypothesized that in proximal gut, some anti-incretin, which are again not.
फोन में नहीं है.
Hello?
Network.
Anti-incretins, which was hypothesized by Rubino, but has not been identified as yet. They are presumed to be released by proximal gut and they decrease insulin release. Rubino did a very novel experiment. He used rats and he excluded their duodenum from the food by bypassing the gut and joining limb of the small bowel to pylorus directly. So once these rats were fed with the diet, they saw that there was no rise in glucose blood level. Whereas in sham patients or the rats with the normal diet, there was a rise in glucose level. He tried to explain this by two factors, the foregut theory and hindgut theory. The foregut theory says that the anti-incretins which were stimulated by gut, they are not getting activated. So anti-incretins are not being released as food is not reaching the duodenum. So this is the foregut theory for reducing diabetes in these patients or rats. Whereas hindgut theory says that the early release of diet into the ileum or distal limb, it releases GLP and other hormones which increases insulin release. So again resulting into lower level of glucose. So these foregut and hindgut theory are basis on which we can assume or presume that these hormones work. Now as we see here, there are three components. One is the restriction of the stomach capacity. Second, the exclusion of duodenum. And third, the early release of nutrients into the distal limb. All these three will play in various form and different kind of surgeries to give their effect. To start with, let us see the intragastric balloon. This is one of the easiest form of surgery, endoscopically done. A balloon is inflated into the stomach for short term, and we can expect a lowering of BMI up to 5 to 9. This can be used as a interval approach for a higher BMI patient to reduce that so that they can be offered surgery later on. Or for a girl who is about to be married and wants to shed some BMI. Lap adjustable surgery bands were in vogue nearly 20 years back. They simply create a hindrance in the stomach. So a upper pouch is created and lower pouch is created. They are adjustable. So once you fill the band, again there will be more narrowing and there will be restriction to the food emptying. They are easy to perform, give a reasonably good result. That means a 40% exit weight loss at 1 year post-operative time. But unfortunately, there are a lot many complications involved because it's a foreign body, there may be erosion, GRD, esophageal dilatation, fistula, and up to 50% may require removal. Then came the laparoscopic vertical sleeve gastrectomy. This was designed initially as an interval procedure for higher BMI patients so that they can come down to a lower BMI to be offered a better procedure like Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. But once we saw the result, it itself was good enough to see the weight reduction as well as control of diabetes. So up to 45 of BMI, this has become now the first choice of surgery which is being offered. We can expect a reduction of around 50 to 60% of excess weight loss by this surgery. This works on two mechanisms. One is the mechanical restriction. As we know, we can see we have created a tube-like stomach with a small pouch of around 30 to 50 ml. This acts just like as a conduit and this acts as a reservoir. So there is a mechanical restriction. Secondly, there is a hormonal modification as we have excluded fundus, which is the main release organ for ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone. So the appetite is lost. Then comes the malabsorptive procedures. Among them, jejunal-ileal bypass was the first and foremost. It is no longer performed because of high complication rates. Here is the diagram. What we have done, we have joined this limb of jejunum to distal ileum. So now very small ileum is available for the absorption. That has all been excluded. So it produces severe malnutrition. So now not being performed. A newer kind of procedure is endobarrier. Endo sleeve is put into the stomach, which retains here at the pylorus through this ring, and sleeve extends into the proximal jejunum. So how does it work? It produces malabsorption as well as it doesn't allow hormones to be released, especially the anti-incretins, which were hypothesized by Rubino. Roux-en-Y is the procedure which is number one procedure right now in the world, which is being offered. It creates a small pouch, as we can see here, which is of 20 to 30 ml volume, and a Roux-en-Y limb is created and a very small opening is created. So what we are doing, restricting food intake, restricting release, as well as exclusion of the duodenum and the proximal gut, and the release of these nutrients quite distally so that they are not absorbed well. So we are using all three approaches. This is one of the best procedure right now being offered to the patients. We can expect a 60 to 70% exit weight loss at 2 years with a proven reduction in obesity-related medical problems. Duodenal stitch is again an advanced procedure, not offered very often because of its complication and difficulty. Duodenal stitch with BPD is again a further advanced procedure. So again, because of complication and difficulty is not offered, but this is one of the best procedure which can give up to 80% of excess weight loss for a long. A midway has been developed, which is known as mini gastric bypass. As we can see here, what we have done, we have excluded this part and a limb has been attached here. So we are creating a conduit, a small pouch, as we do in sleeve gastrectomy, and we are anasmosing here so that we are excluding this duodenum and making one anastomosis. The important thing is, as compared to Roux-en-Y, we are just making one anastomosis. In Roux-en-Y, one anastomosis is here, another is here. This is quite high up. It's quite difficult to create that. So this is a advantage over the Roux-en-Y. So this is technically easier with near similar results. In classical model, what we say that the restricted food intake and malabsorption works, but in the now current model, endocrine and neural hormonal release has also playing part in reducing the appetite, loss of weight, and control of glycemia as well as dyslipidemia. As we can see here, Roux-en-Y gastric bypass works on so many fronts. It alters taste, releases variety of hormones. There's a glucose homeostasis, the GI factors of increased bile acid uptake, microbiota change. There's a decreased hunger, and there's a correction of dyslipidemia. Another newer procedure is ileal transformation. Again, it takes its genesis from the fact that distal ileum is the source for GLP-1. If we transpose this segment higher up, what we are achieving, a food will come early on to touch this segment, so this GLP is released. Simultaneously, a part of stomach is excised, so the ghrelin is also taken away. Both these factors result into a better homeostasis for glucose as well as weight reduction. This can be offered for the patient with diabetes without need for weight loss. If we eliminate this part, this will simply reduce the blood sugar level. Other procedures are gastric balloon, as already discussed. There's a pacing as well as endoluminal surgery by plication endoscopically. Post-surgical complication, as we expect, there are plenty. There can be anastomotic leak, DVT. In long run, there may be cholelithiasis, stomach ulceration, and constipation. Common nutrition-related problem because we are trying to create malabsorption, protein energy malnutrition. So there may be anemia, metabolic bone diseases, failure to thrive, steatorrhea, a lot of things because the whole anatomy and physiology get disturbed. So we have to take care of that later on. Patient has to accommodate to a new diet because they've got a very small reservoir. To start with, they can just take liquids, but later on, after a month, they can come to their normal diet, but the dietary pattern changes. Now, first, they will have to choose protein, which should be up to 40 to 75% depending on the need. Then comes the carbohydrate and fat, and last come the salads because they will fill the stomach and they are not able to take adequate calories as well as protein. Nutritional implications of various surgeries may be different for different kind of surgeries. As you can see, gastric band, just there's a folic acid deficiency, but for Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, there's a malabsorption of various vitamins, iron and calcium. And for bigger procedure like BPD and duodenal switch, a lot of vitamins and minerals will not be absorbed. So you will have to supplement them around 75% gram of protein per day, a lot of multivitamin with iron, calcium, folate, B12 has to be given to compensate the loss. Now let us see what is the impact of surgery these patients. There was a meta-analysis by Buchwald which showed that by different kind of surgery, so we consider here gastric bypass as standard one, there is around 61% excess weight loss and resolution of diabetes and up to 83%, hypertension up to 67%. The same were endorsed by another study by Swedish obese subject study. The impact on metabolic syndrome can be seen here. The score changes for most for the steatosis, less for the inflammation and fibrosis. Similarly, as we can see, even after 10 years, diabetes, hypertension, and hypertriglyceridemia. In a surgery group, there's a resolution in 72, 62, 34, 36 as compared to non-surgical groups. One important thing is that we need not to wait long for reduction of medication for diabetes or antihypertensive drugs or lipid lowering agents. As we can see here, even after surgery within few weeks, these all come down. The reason is not weight loss. The reason is alteration in the neuropeptide and hormonal balance of the gut. So in summary, what we can say that we'll find that after surgery, most of the people will lose around 65 to 80% of their excess weight. Even after 2 years of surgery, there may be rapid improvement in morbid side effects of these obesity like diabetes, blood pressure, sleep apnea, and high cholesterol levels. In conclusion, I'd like to say that obesity is recognized as a disease with increasing prevalence, associated with significant morbidity and mortality, with poor quality of life. Obesity and metabolic syndrome are strongly linked together. Surgical therapy is more than restriction or malabsorption. Surgery results into lowering of the fat mass, better glycemic control, and lipid levels by altering hormonal and neuropeptide regulation. Thank you.